this opportunity for us to share with our European friends and colleagues is a way for us to celebrate fromaggi around the world. Part of the reason that we did this. My journey starts with my family. I come from families that really enjoyed great food. My mother's family was Italian American, my dad's family was Romanian Jewish, and in both places, both families were really enjoyed the opportunity to sit down around a table and to share great food. And part of the dedication of the book is to my parents, because the memories of Parmigiano Reggiano and cheese strudel are still very much something that I hold very precious. When I came to Vermont, I had the opportunity to work for the Vermont Land Trust, and food was an opportunity to teach people about the value of the working landscape, and it was a great way to introduce them to the value of land conservation. In the late 1990s, Shelburne Farms asked me if I'd be willing to produce a program they call Pasture to Palate, the Art of Cheese Making. And that program started in the year 2000. It's still going on today. And a couple of years later, in part through my involvement with Slow Food International, Slow Food USA, I was asked if I would chair the U.S. presence at the Slow Food Cheese Festival in Bra, Italy in 2001. A colleague of mine from Oregon, Gregory McLaren, and I were the co-chairs. We have organized the largest assembly of artisan-made cheeses from America ever presented in Europe. Europeans have for so many years looked at the United States and thought of us as the land of Velveeta and Cheese Whiz. We are changing that understanding and that taste impression. We have 52 cheesemakers represented, 85 cheeses from 17 states. It's a celebration of American artisan cheese production.
Abbiamo la gorgonzola mondiale, numero 1 nel mondo. Assaggiare. To, ciapa. Ciapa lì. To, naturale. Guardi che roba, uno spettacolo.
Aspetta, fagliela vedere così.
Guardi. Guardi che gorgonzola.
Primo piano.
Fior di Prato, Garrone, Torino.
The attention that's being brought in the international cheese community, a food community here in Bra, is probably the first and most dramatic statement that America has produced some of the finest cheeses in the world.
I'm with the American Embassy in Rome, and we've come to Cheese 2001 in order to support the cheesemakers of the United States who have their products here on display.
We came here to share with Europe, with the rest of the world, that America is a place to take seriously when it comes to good cheese. More than anything else, Europeans look at America as the land of fast food, of industrial food, and a place that you can't find something good to eat. I'm interested in changing that impression. Up until the 1850s, there was a great deal of cheese made in New England and points west. It was made on the farm. But in the 1850s, an enterprising New York cheesemaker figured out how to make cheese in an industrial way. And literally within 40 to 50 years, all of the farmstead cheesemaking pretty much disappeared all over the country. What began to change, roughly about 1970 to 1980, is that Americans were traveling, they were tasting great food, and came back, especially from Europe, and said, hey, I just had this wonderful chèvre in Paris, or an extraordinary sheep cheese in Italy. Why are they not being made in the United States? So our tastes changed, number one. Second is that our interest in good food over the last 30 years has continued to grow, of all kinds of foods, whether we're talking about bread or great wine or good beer. And what's happened in a 30-year period is a really dramatic transformation. For me, artisan means there's a degree of handwork involved to make the product. that in many cases the individual is not only in the cheese room working with the curds and whey, but it may also be a farmstead operation where they're out tending the animals, they milk them, that milk doesn't go any further than their cheese room where they turn it into great product. This is something that's happening almost in every state in the Union. What I found also is that cheese making has exploded in terms of the number of people who are making cheese. In the year 2000, I found 190 or so cheesemakers. Today, there are over 400, and there are 345 of them who are profiled in the Atlas of American Artisan Cheese. The other thing that's happened, and it's not just in states like Vermont, where we see wonderful farmers markets, but the farmer market movement nationwide, not just in rural areas, but in cities. New York City Union Square Market is one of the great markets now in the world. Those markets have put the producers in contact with buyers, and they've developed a relationship. That's important because so many people want to know, where does my food come from? You know, I'm asked often to name my favorite cheese maker. I find the question difficult. There are people that I have singled out in my book because of what they've taught me. Blaney Fondiller of Lazy Lady Farm, who taught me a lot about cheese. Marjorie Sussman and Marion Pollock of Orb Weaver Farm, who are among my best friends when it comes to cheese. Allison Hooper of Vermont Butter and Cheese. A very good friend named Ross Gagnon, who used to be the cheesemaker at Shelburne Farms, who I still call the poet of cheese. For probably the last 6 or 7 years, I wanted to tell more stories about artisan producers. Their hard work, their devotion to their animals, their devotion to quality. It's a humbling experience to work with any of them because you find out how hard they work and sometimes how little the rest of us might work, just to put a wonderful piece of cheese on the table. And in late 2005, a colleague asked me about writing a book. Both she is a writer and her mother, who was a food editor and author herself, took a look at the proposal and said, we like what we see. We really think you should put some time and energy into it. I went to Chelsea Green and proposed to them that we do an Atlas of American Artisan Cheese. What makes it different today than 5 or 6 years ago is that we're now looking at far more producers than existed when I first got this idea. The book, I think, is much more timely, and one way of understanding this is to see what's changed with the American Cheese Society, which is the large umbrella organization that represents small producers around the country. The number of cheeses that have been submitted for competition. In 2006, there were more than 900 cheeses submitted. That was almost 200 more than the year before. And we expect here in Vermont this year, when the ACS annual meeting occurs, that we will probably surpass the 1,000 mark for the first time. It shows the quality of production, it shows the interest, and it also is a reflection of how American tastes have changed, which to me is part of the fun of doing all this. It's to educate people about good food, about people who are working the land, about an alternative to other forms of agriculture.